So to open up this computer, I actually have to move the keyboard out of the way. There are actually 6 screws. It's best to just remove the keyboard, set it aside. You can see there's 6 flathead screws around the perimeter of the front of the case. And when you remove those and then stand the computer on its face, which you can still do with the keyboard off because it has these rails here to sit on. Stand the computer up on its face, and then the entire back housing lifts off. You can just use the handle and lift it off the machine, lay it back down, and you're inside. So let me do that and then we'll come back. So once you've removed the shell of the machine, this is what you're left with inside. You don't see much. Everything is covered with these metal shields. I would guess this is for 2 reasons. The first is to protect everything against static discharge, and the second to limit the amount of RF interference that leaks out, because of course this thing is made out of a plastic case, whereas I believe the normal PC and PCXT have metal cases, so this would be why they've done this. So if you want to get to the guts of the thing, you've got to remove this shield, which is 3 more flathead screws, 1 there, 1 right there, and then 1 hiding down there. So let me remove those and take this shield off, and then we'll come back. Alright, and once your metal shield is off, we are greeted with the guts of the computer. There's a lot to talk about inside here, so let's get started. First I'll show you the motherboard. This is a standard IBM PC XT motherboard. Unfortunately, the earlier version that's limited to 256 kilobytes of RAM, complete with tantalum capacitors that like to explode. Now luckily, I haven't encountered an explosion yet. Where this computer is physically in such mint condition, I would assume it doesn't have a lot of hours on it, which might be why there haven't been any of explosions, but I know they're inevitable, and I'm not looking forward to the day when I get the crap scared out of me from an explosion. But there you see, there's your 8-bit ISA expansion slots. And there's a reason I've got a random piece of paper in here. It's one of the upgrades I'll show you. Paper's not the upgrade, but it's part of the upgrade. And there's all your 7400 series TTL logic chips. Some bodge jobs, these yellow wires, these would have been factory bodge jobs done to repair some sort of manufacturing error. Now, I'll show you the first upgrade I've done. Take a look at this. It's upside down, so I get to flip it up in editing. Take a look at that CPU. Now this thing, from the factory, came with an Intel 8088 CPU, and indeed that's what this one had when I got it, but I've upgraded it. This is an NEC V20 CPU. I bought this on eBay. It came from China. It would have been like $10 or $15 or something like that. And yeah, this is a drop-in upgrade for the Intel 8088. These are really cool. The NEC V20, it's fully 8088 compatible, but it's a little bit faster. It's a little bit more efficient in how it executes instructions, and so it's a little bit faster. But also, and this is really cool, the V20 is partially 8286 compatible. It's got a good number of the 286 instructions, so a few 286 programs will run on this computer, which was never, meant to have a 286 CPU. They'll run on this computer with that CPU, which is really cool. The only big limitation this has compared to the Intel 8286 is it doesn't have protected mode. So protected mode applications can't work. Protected mode was the special 286 mode, which handled memory a bit differently. This doesn't have that, but it has some of the 286 instructions. So there's a few software programs that require a 286, but they only need the instructions. They don't need the protected mode, so those can run with this CPU, which is really darn cool. So I'm really happy to have been able to do this upgrade. It's important to note that while the V20 replaces an Intel 8088, there's also the NEC V30 which replaces the Intel 8086, and the V30 is an even faster and more capable CPU. But they're not interchangeable. Just like the 8088 and the 8086 are not interchangeable, there's motherboard differences that can't let you just drop one in place of the other. So just like that, the NEC V20 and the NEC V30, they're not interchangeable either. So you can only use a V20 to replace an 8088 or a V30 to replace an 8086. So that's definitely important to know. Another important thing to note is there is a risk that comes with buying these CPUs. Like I said, I got this on eBay from China, and they're plentiful on eBay and they're quite cheap, and they all come from China or Hong Kong or whatever. And there's a lot of debate among the vintage computer community regarding whether or not these chips are genuine. And if they aren't genuine, if they're still, good enough and good quality and work properly and stuff like that. And some people say yes and some people say no. Some people claim they've received CPUs that did not work or did not work as expected. And some people have reported that they get CPUs that work just fine. All I can say is I've stuck this CPU in, and there doesn't seem to be any issue. I recall running one speed testing program and it didn't report an increase in speed, but it might have been just that one program. I've got to run some more software. I've got to find out if there's software that can specifically test how functional this CPU is and see that it has all the instructions and stuff. So I can see, just how genuine this CPU is, if it is at all, and how well it works compared to how well it should work. But I can say right now that the computer is working just fine with this CPU. I haven't encountered any software incompatibilities or anything like that, so I'll leave it in there. It's good enough for me. I have kept the original Intel 8088. It's safe and sound in the special IC container that this CPU came in, so if I ever want to, I can drop that right back in there, and you'll be good to go, no problem. This empty socket beside it, that's for an Intel 8087 Math coprocessor. So if I ever want to find one of those someday, I can't remember if they're easy to get or not, but if I ever get a hold of one, I can stick it in there and then speed this computer up even more. So looking elsewhere, there's our power connectors coming off the power supply. They run on the underside of the chassis in from the power supply over there. And here's something a bit interesting. This is kind of neat. If you look here, you've got this black cable running all the way to the back of the computer, and then it plugs in a secret hole in the back, which is covered when the case is on. Well, what could that be? Well, we can unplug this and get a load of this. This is kind of neat. It is a 5-pin DIN. And you may be able to guess, that is the keyboard connector. Of course, because this is a standard XT motherboard, it's got a standard XT keyboard connector, just like, an IBM PC XT would have. Except because of this computer and its design, this cable, which plugs in here, runs to that modular jack on the front. So that's how that works. And so, if you were really crafty and had a reason to do it, you could, modify the plastic case, drill a hole so that you had access to this, so you could plug in any XT keyboard without having to modify the front of the case. So yeah, that's kind of funny, kind of neat. So looking right here, this is the floppy drive, the one floppy drive. And just because of the design of the case, it's pretty hard to remove. If you want to remove this floppy drive, you got to remove all the expansion cards, and then you can't really use a wrench unless it's a special wrench meant for fitting in tight spaces, because there's bolts over here you got to remove, and you got to remove these screws to remove this bracket and get this nut out of the way, and then there's a nut here, and it's pretty hard. It's pretty tedious to move the floppy drives around, but there it is anyhow. And there's the cable and just a Molex connector and the data cable, which runs from the floppy controller card, which is right here. And I'm going to mention something that I think is important to know, because I think there's a fair number of people who have IBM PCs but don't know this. If you've ever heard an IBM PC, and you've heard the floppy drive in them. IBM PCs have that characteristic noise the floppy drive makes when it seeks. You know, it goes like that. And that's not normal. It's not supposed to sound like that. The reason IBM floppy drives are so damn loud when they seek is because the lubrication is dried up. They're not supposed to sound like that. You need to lubricate them. I've done that to this drive. Mine's lubricated, and you'll find when we turn this on, it's a lot quieter than most IBM floppy drives are if you look up any other YouTube videos of them. And I think people just aren't aware of this because whereas most floppy drives, you know, stop working completely when their lubrication dries up because the heads can't physically move, these things are built well enough and are just tough enough that the head assembly actually still works, even though it's grinding along those rails really loudly. So yeah, lubricate your IBM floppy drives, and they'll quiet down significantly. Now let's talk expansion cards, and this is where a lot of the upgrades that I've done to this computer come into play. And I've done some very significant upgrades to this computer. Let's start with this card furthest in the back here. Now, as I mentioned, this computer unfortunately comes with the early version of the PCXT motherboard that can only take up to 256 kilobytes of RAM. You can expand it up to 640K, but it has to be through an expansion card. And that's this first card, which you see here, which I bought for this machine from a member on the on VCFed, the Vintage Computer Federation forums. This is a card called an AST 6-Pack Plus. It was a very popular IBM computer upgrade back in the early days. It's a multi-function expansion card, and as you can see, it's a big full-length card here. Its primary function is that it upgrades your memory. You can see right here, there's a ton of memory chips on this thing. This has the capability of holding up to 384 kilobytes of RAM, which in addition to the 256 on this computer's motherboard, would put it up to the full 640K, which is amazing. Now, I have fully populated this card, but unfortunately I've discovered this particular card, I have no idea what's happened or why. It's not fully functional. For some reason, it won't work with all the RAM in it. The computer works just fine, but it only recognizes 576 kilobytes of RAM. And I've asked on a couple of different forums about this. I've tried rearranging the memory chips, you know, swapping out banks to see what the behavior was like, and it turns out that this card simply doesn't behave correctly. People got me to do tests such as removing one chip and removing an entire bank, and you know, the card was supposed to respond in a predictable way, and my card doesn't. There's something actually electronically wrong with this card, and it only recognizes some of the RAM on it, which is unfortunate. So unfortunately, I don't have the full 640K of RAM on this computer like I planned. I only have 576K, although luckily that's good enough for almost any piece of software you'd want to run on this thing. So it's unfortunate, but at least it's still a huge upgrade over the original 256K, which is very limiting for a computer like this. You know, at the time it was fine, but now today, basically any piece of software later than 1984 or 85, 256K just isn't going to cut it. So this has been a very worthwhile upgrade. I paid $40 for this card, which was a pretty good price. This card does other things though, not just expand the RAM. It's a full multifunction card. This card also has a battery-backed real-time clock calendar, which is excellent. And you can see right there, there's the coin cell battery that keeps the clock and calendar active while the computer's off. And AST supplied this card with software such that when you boot up into MS-DOS, that software takes over in supplying MS-DOS with the time and date, so you don't have to put it in manually, which is excellent. So when you turn this computer on, you don't get prompted for the time and date. It's input automatically, and everything functions as normal, which is excellent. And this card even operates correctly with the year 2000 and later. Funny enough, the software itself isn't quite year 2000 compatible. It shows the year as being 1900 something. But MS-DOS itself sees that time and date in the correct format. So as far as running your programs and MS-DOS itself is concerned, this card works just fine in the year 2000 and beyond, which is great. Another thing this card does is it supplies the parallel port. So you can see it's got this ribbon cable coming off it, and that's actually going to my parallel port. And it also supplies the serial port. You can see the serial port is on this card. So very good. So we get more RAM, a real-time clock calendar, and parallel and serial ports. So it's a very worthwhile upgrade to your IBM PC for sure. Now let's talk about the video card. Here it is. This is an ordinary IBM color graphics adapter. Same card that was installed in the PC and the PC XT. And there, right there, that is the composite video output, and these black and yellow wires go to the CRT display. So that is where the display is getting its output. And like I said, the display is functionally nothing more than a black and white television that is an ordinary composite video signal. It's actually paralleled with the composite video output that's on the outside of the card. Now here's the weird thing about this card. This is not the original card that came in the computer. I do have the original card that came in the computer. It originally worked just fine, and then one day I turned it on and the display was all messed up. There were dollar signs everywhere and letters that were, you know, showing wrong letters, like literally words spelled wrong and stuff, and the video was just totally messed up. And I asked for help in the Vintage Computer forums, and we determined that a memory chip on the original card had gone bad. It actually went bad while sitting, because when I had powered on the computer to see this garbled video, it had been in storage for a few months since I last powered it on, so it went bad while sitting, which is unfortunate. So yeah, I have the original card currently in storage, and it's got a bad memory chip. I think I was actually pointed out to which particular chip it was. You can tell which particular chip it was based on what letters were appearing incorrectly and what garbled characters were appearing on the screen. In this case, the dollar sign in place of a blank space. So yeah, someday the memory chips, I don't think they're a type that are actually made anymore. I don't know if there's an equivalent or what. But I recall going on eBay and finding that you'll pay like $20 or $30 for a single memory chip. But someday I want to do it, and I'll fix that card and then stick it back in this computer so this computer can have its original video card back. So that leaves the question, where did I get this card? When my card went bad, I actually posted a video on my second channel, The Maritime Man 2, showing what was happening, and I also spoke about it on the Vintage Computer forums, and this attracted the attention of someone halfway across the world who decided that he could offer to help me, and that was my near and dear friend Murray. Well, he's not near, gosh, he's as far away from me as you can get, but he's very dear to me. And yeah, this was how him and I first met and started talking and stuff, and he's a good friend of mine now, and he offered to send me this card because he has an IBM PC and he had upgraded it to EGA graphics recently, so he had this spare CGA card that he wasn't using anymore, and he offered to send it to me, and he did so, and thanks to his generosity in sending this card, this thing is now up and functioning again, because this card works just perfectly. And yeah, he saved this thing, so I really appreciate it. I made a couple of videos about getting this card and getting it working, because when I got this card, I found that while it worked just fine, no more garbled video, it had another problem. The display, especially in graphics mode, had a really wavy output, like kind of a physically or spatially distorted output. It just didn't look right at all, and I spoke to Murray about this, and the card worked just fine in his machine, so he was certainly confused. And then I asked about this again on the Vintage Computer forums, and someone informed me that probably what was happening was that this card, for whatever reason, was outputting a higher voltage video signal than the original card. And it was actually outputting too strong of a video signal, and that's what was causing the CRT output to distort. And I had found that if I connected an external television set or whatever to the external composite video output, and this is normal behavior when you're using this card in a portable PC and you connect an external monitor to it, that actually slightly dims the video showing on the internal display, because you now have two displays running off the same output, and it literally loads it down and lowers the output voltage. And so I found when I connected an external monitor to the external composite video output, and it drug the output voltage down, that actually fixed the distortion on the display. So it was indeed, the problem was indeed the CRT getting too strong of a video signal. And so I was able to fix that, and it's a pretty ingeniously simple fix. If you look right down there, you can see a resistor. I took that resistor, that's something like a 250 ohm resistor, and I just soldered it right across the terminals for the external composite video output. And that loads down the video output enough that the video signal is now at a correct level, and there's no more warping of the video display. So that problem is fixed. So this card is working perfectly good in this computer now, which is great. And I made, I think, 2 or 3 videos on my second channel documenting how I was able to fix this. A video when I first got the card, a video when I discovered the warped video output, and then a video when I fixed the warped video output. So yeah, that's the story with that. I'm hoping that someday I can get the original card fixed and just put that back into service in this computer. The original card's also kind of cool because it's got a brown PCB, just like the motherboard, whereas this card has a green PCB. So yeah, there's the color graphics adapter and the story behind me having to change the card out and how I ultimately got this card to work well with this computer. Let's talk about, well, just briefly, this card here. This is a standard IBM floppy controller, and that's literally all it is. It's standard fare in any IBM PC. It's just a floppy controller. It's got the internal connector for the internal floppy drives, and it's got a connector for an external floppy drive. And while I think of it, I forgot to mention before, if you look right above the floppy drive, it's got this little pocket here, and that's actually where you can put a few floppy disks. Further making this computer, portable and very much all-in-one, because there you could store your most important disks. You wouldn't even have to carry a disk container. So that's very cool. And some other portable computers had a feature like this as well. It's a nice use of the extra space. Now let's talk about the last expansion card in the system, this very pretty blue card. What on earth could this be? Well, this card is also related to this doohickey, which I have sitting on top of a piece of paper on top of the motherboard. Now, if we look right here, this is an IDE hard drive. It's a normal garden variety IDE hard drive. But how? You can't use a modern IDE hard drive on a system like this. IDE controllers were never made for XT class computers. Well, that's where this expansion card comes in. This is, and you've probably heard of this before, this is an XT IDE card. There it is, and there's the URL where you can read about it. This is a card that a group of people invented that allows, it's an 8-bit ISA card, and it allows a modern IDE hard drive, or as such, a compact flash card, to be used in an XT class computer. This is an amazing card. It's an amazing upgrade for an XT class computer, because, you know, MFM hard drives for these things, they're just getting so difficult to buy now because they're getting old and they're all starting to break down and have age-related issues and stuff like that. And this card is just a godsend. The people who invented this and for how cheaply they sell it, they're saints. This is an amazing card. So yeah, you can attach, there's the IDE connector, you can attach any modern IDE hard drive and use it on this computer, and it works like any hard drive. It works in MS-DOS, it works with any programs. They just see it as an ordinary hard drive. There's no really special, there's nothing special you have to do to make it work with your software. Once the card is set up and your hard drive's set up, it just works, and it's amazing. This is an amazing card. I bought this card for myself as a Christmas present. You can buy these as a kit, so just the bare PCB and all the components that you have to solder yourself for, I think $28 if I remember correctly, or you could buy an assembled unit for something like $50 or $60. I totally forget now, but I bought the kit and I soldered this thing all by myself, and it took a bit of work. It was a few hours getting everything soldered, and I think I counted up, there were something like 300 individual solder points on this thing that you have to solder. And believe it or not, when I got this thing soldered, it worked perfectly first time. I had no cold solder joints, no incorrectly placed components, nothing. This thing worked perfect, which that's just an unbelievable amount of luck for me. And yeah, it worked perfect, and they supply a program. When you get the card assembled, it's not ready to go yet, because right down there, that's an Atmel microcontroller, and you have to program that microcontroller, and that's how this thing works. And so they supply you, you can actually download it from the internet, a program used to program that microcontroller, and that was easy to do. You just boot to DOS through a floppy disk and then run the program, and then the card is ready to go. And after that, it's very much just plug and play. You plug your hard drive in, it detects the hard drive, and it's good to go. And the card itself actually, the microcontroller acts as a boot ROM. So even before your operating system loads, and of course this is necessary for a hard drive controller, before your operating system loads, the card is active and it loads a boot ROM, which, you know, talks to the computer to tell it that it has a hard drive that it can boot from. And also the card has its own basically bootstrapper. It's got a little on-screen interface that briefly appears while the computer's booting right after it's finished the memory count. And while that little interface has appeared, you can press a key on the keyboard to boot to a floppy disk if you want to. Because this card sort of overrides the normal boot procedure, the computer no longer checks the floppy drive for a disk to boot from. It just goes straight to the hard drive, which is fine. But you can press a key on the keyboard, and it'll boot from a floppy disk instead. Likewise, there are other things you can do with this card, and I'll show those when we power on the computer. But yeah, this is an amazing card. And if you want my honest opinion, if you have a computer like this and you'd like to upgrade it with a hard drive, don't waste your time and money and sorrow trying to get an MFM hard drive on eBay or whatever. If there's someone on a vintage computer forum selling one that they've tested to work fine, then knock yourself out. But otherwise, just don't bother with them. They're not worth it anymore. It's too hard to get one that works correctly, and they're super expensive to buy as well, just because they're getting less and less common. Just get one of these. They're cheap enough, and just use like a compact flash card or a regular old IDE hard drive like I'm using. It works so well, and it's fast. It's very fast. This is faster than any MFM hard drive you could ever use, and it's probably faster than a SCSI hard drive. And it's just a wonderful piece of equipment. You may ask, why would you use an ordinary mechanical hard drive when you could use a compact flash card that'll be faster, probably more reliable, and take up less space? It's just because I have a ton of these drives, just sitting in storage and I want to put one to use. And I like having a mechanical hard drive. It's just got that charm to it, you know, hearing it click away when you're working and stuff like that. I just really like it. So that's what I'm using here. And something that's really important, you know, where an XT class computer, of course, has such limited processing power, my recommendation is don't use a hard drive or a compact flash card bigger than 128 megabytes. You can use one as big as you want, and if you use, you know, MS-DOS 5 or 6, you can have a partition up to 2 gigabytes, or you can have, if you have a hard drive bigger than 2 gigabytes, you can have multiple partitions, and you can use all the space on it if you want. But on a computer with this limited processing power, you'll dearly pay for using a large drive, because whenever you do a directory command, MS-DOS checks the amount of free space on the drive, and if you have a large drive, it takes a very long time to count up that free space. You'll see this when we power this thing on. This is my smallest IDE hard drive. It's 120 megabytes. It's my Quantum Pro Drive ELS from 1993. And yeah, with 120 megabytes, MS-DOS takes 30 seconds, 20 or 30 seconds to count up the free space, and that's a pretty long wait. You got to be patient to wait for it to do that. So definitely don't, you know, go as small as you can while still having enough space to do everything you want when you use this card. If you don't want to wait too long for MS-DOS to count up free space, don't go any bigger than like 32 megabytes if you can help it, and you'll be good to go. Or if you're patient like me, by golly, throw in just as big of a drive as you want. I actually have used most of the space on this hard drive, which I didn't think was possible. You know, software for an XT class computer is not very big. I would have thought I wouldn't have ever used more than 20 or 30 megabytes. No, if I remember right, I used like 80 megabytes on that drive. So I've got a lot of programs on there that I can demonstrate in a future video. But yeah, I'm so glad I bought this card. It's an amazing upgrade for an XT class computer. Really awesome. I might buy another one to use in my other XT class computer, the Epson Apex Plus. That computer has an MFM hard drive in it, and the hard drive is functional, but it doesn't work that good anymore. The drive has an electronic issue. When it's cold, and I'm talking physically cold, it won't spin up to full speed, and it won't start up. And you have to leave the computer on for like half an hour until the hard drive physically gets warm, and then you have to turn the computer off and back on, and then it'll start up and work. So I might buy another one of these for that computer to use in place of that. And the other reason to do that is the video card I have in that computer now, which is not an appropriate video card. It's a VGA card. It's a Trident video card from the early 90s. It's a 16-bit ISA card, but it works in an 8-bit ISA slot. That card conflicts with the MFM controller in that computer, but I have tried this in the Epson, and to my recollection, it works. This card works just fine with that video card. I ought to just find a more appropriate video card, because that video card doesn't work that great anyway. For some reason, most of the time you turn the computer on, it starts up in a black and white mode. Everything's in black and white, and you have to keep turning the computer on and off until it decides to display color. I don't know why it does that. But at least for as long as I have to use that card, I know that the XT IDE works just fine in that computer, so I might buy a second one of these for use in that computer and just probably offload the MFM drive. I'll probably, you know, I love MFM drives, you know, stepper motor actuators. They're so loud and awesome, but they're such a pain to deal with now. They're so unreliable, and the older they're getting, the less reliable they're becoming. And I think it's just not worth dealing with them anymore. If I were to get an XT IDE card for the Epson, I might just offload the drive and MFM controller, try to sell them to someone who would want them. The controller's just fine, and you know, the drive somewhat works. So yeah, that's possibly the route I'd go someday for that computer. It'd make it much nicer to use. So that's all the expansion cards I have in this thing. I do want to mention a couple of expansion cards that came in this thing when I got it, but I removed. One of them was an ordinary IBM serial card. I removed it because I now have a serial port that's on the 6-pack plus card here. And you can have 2 serial ports, there's nothing wrong with that, but I have no need for 2 serial ports. And I think possibly I couldn't fit that IBM serial card in these other slots. You see these last 4 or 5 slots here, you can only have really short cards because the floppy drive's in the way, and that might be the case with that serial card. The other card that was in here when I got it is a bit more interesting. It was another AST multifunction card, not a 6-pack plus. It had no memory expansion capabilities, but it also had a real-time clock calendar, and I believe it had a parallel port on it. So that's that card came in this computer, and that's also really nice. I might stick that card in the Epson Apex Plus, because the Epson has a real-time clock calendar built onto the motherboard, but the battery was no good and I removed it, and so it's not functional anymore. But that card also just takes an ordinary coin cell, and so I might see if it works in that computer, and if it does, then that'd be perfect. And gosh, I haven't used the Epson in years, literally, and if I were to get an XT IDE and that AST real-time clock calendar card working, I might start using that computer more, because it'd be a lot more enjoyable to use that way. So that is just about everything on this side of the computer. And I don't think I mentioned the reason I have the hard drive sitting here. Well, it's on a piece of paper just so it doesn't short anything out. And I have it right here because it's easily accessible, because I can just connect this drive to a modern computer to put programs on it. So whenever I want to, I can just, without having to take the case of the computer off, just reach in there, pull out the drive, yank the IDE and power cables off it, and then put it in a modern computer to load data onto it, which is pretty darn great, very convenient. So that's everything on this side of the computer. Let's turn it around here and take a look at the other side. There's some interesting stuff on the other side. Well, first of all, I suppose I'll show, there's some caution stickers here. Of course, this is where the CRT is, this is where the power supply is. By the way, I don't think it mentioned it on the info sticker on the back, but this computer was made in the USA, of course. Now you can see there's some info on the back here, which is pretty interesting. Here's the power supply. Passed inspection, unit final test, no errors in final. Well, that's good. I'm glad I got one with no errors. Operation serial number, operator ID, the time and date, and there's the date, June 19th, 1984, so that'd be around the time this thing was assembled. So that's very cool. And then over here, this is actually information about the CRT display. Now take a look at this, this is pretty neat. Zenith Radio Corporation. So this is a Zenith CRT display, and that's pretty cool. I didn't know Zenith ever made computer displays. And if you look here, it says 13 volts DC, so it's a standard DC powered, basically a black and white television, like I've said before. 1.4 amps, so that's what, 20 watts or so that the CRT display uses. So yeah, that's pretty neat. And I think the last thing to show, and I've got to tip this thing on its face to get a look at it. So, well, there it says power supply. So there's the underside of everything. And there's your speaker, your little beeper. It's a full range speaker, just like was used in all of IBM's early machines. It's obnoxiously loud. I hate how loud it is. I'd like to modify it and stick a resistor in there to quiet it down some. And I actually attempted doing that once. I attempted to desolder this wire so I could do that, but I couldn't get it unsoldered for some reason, and I was scared of accidentally desoldering. You can see the fine braided copper lead there that actually connects the coil of the speaker. So yeah, I tried doing it but wasn't ultimately successful. I'd like to do something to quiet it down. It's a Shogyo or something. 8 ohms, 0.2 watts, made in Korea. Kind of interesting to see such a foreign part on a IBM computer. And that's inside of this thing. That's the entire inside. Here you can see the CRT. Yeah, that's everything. And you can see the chassis here is metal, very thick steel, I think it is. Very impressively built this machine is. And then clad in this very thick plastic. Look at how just how thick this plastic is. Very impressive. So, I'm going to put this thing back together and then we are going to power this on. I'm very excited. Alright, the computer's all back together and I do have it plugged in and we are ready to boot this thing up. I'm excited. I haven't touched this thing in several months and I'm a little bit nervous too because, you know, just it seems when you let things this old sit for a long time, they like to break while they're sitting and you turn them on and they don't work right anymore. So I hope this thing works as expected. You'll see a number of things happen before we get to the DOS prompt. Oh, by the way, the operating system. I'm running MS-DOS 5. I should have installed PC-DOS 5. That's just IBM's version of MS-DOS. That's just, everything's rebranded to IBM PC-DOS since this is an IBM machine, but no matter anyhow. But that's what I'm running, MS-DOS 5. And yeah, you'll see a number of things happen when this thing boots up. First, it'll count up all the memory, 576 kilobytes. Then you'll see the boot ROM of the XT IDE card, and it'll acknowledge the hard drive and give you the opportunity to boot from a floppy disk if you want to. And then when it finally starts booting from the hard drive, it'll load a number of things. I've got a lot of software installed. I've got Norton Utilities, so that does some things at boot time, and I have Microsoft Mouse installed, just the full Microsoft Mouse software, so that does some stuff at boot time, and then there's probably one or two other things beside that, so you'll see a lot of stuff happen. But let's flip the power switch and hope hope nothing explodes. And there's counting up the RAM, that's good. This will take quite a while. Alright, good. It's always a little bit tense getting past that 256K because if something's wrong, that's the point where it stops if there's something wrong with the AST 6-pack Plus card. There's the XT IDE boot ROM. You can see the hard drive there. And now it's booting. You might be able to hear the hard drive. The mouse driver, the Norton Utilities image program, and the clock software. And we are done. So we are now at the DOS prompt. And this is actually a really good opportunity to talk about something that I forgot to mention before. This computer does have one major design flaw. Because this is a composite display and it's a monochrome display, whereas the video card is still outputting a color signal, in text mode certain colors of text do not show up correctly and they're not readable. Take a look at this. You can see the options here for the XT IDE boot ROM. You can see it's just you see in the letter A and a chevron and then some garbled stuff, and a letter C and a chevron and some garbled stuff. That's supposed to be colored, you know, it's black text with a colored background. I think it's actually light blue or something like that. And it simply doesn't show up correctly on this display. I believe a letter A here, it says FDD, and then beside the letter C it says HDD. and then F8 it says ROM boot, and then I can't actually read what F6 says. So this is a big issue with this computer, is that certain colors show up as unreadable, just speckles on the monochrome display, which is too bad. Luckily, and this affects a ton of software programs, but luckily there is a DOS command. If you type mode BW80, this forces MS-DOS into the black and white mode so that color text shows up as shades of gray, and then it becomes readable. And it blanks the display, so we'll never be able to see if that fixed the unreadable text from the XT IDE boot ROM, but regardless, it'll hopefully fix it for everything else. So if I do a directory here, you'll see otherwise this display is really nice to look at. It's very pleasant to the eyes. And now it's counting up the free space on the hard drive. And this is going to take a while. And actually there's too much stuff to show on an entire screen. But I have Microsoft Word 5.5 installed. There's the mouse software, Norton Utilities. I have Norton Utilities 6.0 installed, I think, the last version that works on a XT machine. Some people have berated me for using that version. They say that an earlier version, I think it's version 4.2 or 4.3 Advanced Edition, works a lot better. I really don't care, it works. I have Microsoft Works installed. I have WordPerfect installed. Lotus 123. And there you can see we have, well, here it says 72 megabytes free, 73 megabytes, so 80, 90, 100. I'm using about 40, 45 megabytes, so I've got a lot of stuff on this computer. Let me do more and pipe that through there. I think that's how you do it. No, that's certainly how you don't do it. Pipe more. Yes, that's how you do it. So there's that, and more. Oh, and I forget if I mentioned, I don't think I did mention, I do have this Microsoft Serial Mouse connected. So we do have a functional mouse. Now, sort of an oddity with this computer is that graphics mode software displays much brighter on the display than text mode. So when I run a graphics mode software, I have to turn the brightness down, and then when I go back into text mode, I get to turn the brightness up. I forget what the command is for, I might have a different command for Microsoft Word. I think normally it's just Word, but I might have modified it so you have to type Word 55, because at one point I had 2 versions of Word on here. Let me try that. No, I think it's just Word. Nice startup screen there, graphics mode. You can see the graphics mode cursor here. And there, we're in Microsoft Word 5.5. Now, the nice thing about these early versions of Word, or I guess technically the later versions, since it was the later versions that ran in graphics mode, you can actually choose either graphics or text mode, which is nice on a computer like this, because graphics mode is slow. It's very slow. See how long it takes to draw a menu there. And this version of Word actually has a preview mode where it gives you a WYSIWYG, a what you see is what you get preview of what your document will look like, and it takes so long to draw. You only get that in graphics mode, but it's very slow to draw on this machine. Word 6.0 will actually run on this, but it's noticeably slower than Word 5.5, and it didn't really introduce many new functions over Word 5.5, so I just have 5.5 on here. If I go to Customize, and I click Preferences, I can say use, here's the graphics mode menu, and I can choose text mode. Click OK, and we're in text mode, and things will work a little bit faster now, you can see. I can type here, let you listen to that keyboard. So there you go. Couple of errors, but no worries. Very nice, keyboard to type on. Now I can highlight. We'll highlight the word running here, and I'm going to make that bold. Oops. In text mode, it's hard to know what you're highlighting. And I'm going to click the bold indicator there, so now we know that it's bold. You can see it lights up brighter. And if I go File, Print Preview, and this is going to take quite a long time to do because it draws it in graphics mode. So we're in graphics mode now. And there it is. It shows it in zoomed out, so the resolution's way too low to read it. But you could put in images and stuff and they'd show up here. So it's basically so you can get a rough idea of what your document's going to look like formatting wise. So that's Microsoft Word 5.5, and I think that's all I'm going to show for this video. So there, that's your lot. Let's turn this thing off. I'm happy to see that everything is still working just fine with this computer. So that is all I'm going to show of my IBM Model 5155 portable PC from 1984. I'm just over the moon that I've had the privilege to own this computer, because it's definitely not something that's easy to run across anymore, and I got it under such freak circumstances, and it turned out, and the outcome was just so wonderful. So I'm really happy to have this computer. I will keep it for the rest of my life, or the rest of this thing's life, whichever comes first. And yeah, I'm just super happy to get it, and I'm really happy to finally get to show you guys this. I'm sorry it took so long. I know that so many of you have been wanting to see this. It's been a highly requested video, and it was a mixture of time and energy, and I wanted to make it sort of a pro style video, but I got aggravated trying to coordinate that, and then I moved to this apartment, so stuff I had already filmed up to that point was just you know, I had to scrap it. I didn't want to film a video that takes place in two different locations in the same video. So I think this video has turned out pretty well. I didn't go off on any tangents really, which is quite nice. I think it'll be quite long, on the order of 2 hours, but this is a special computer. It's worth that 2 hours of time for sure. So in the future, I'll be uploading a software demonstration video where I'll just show a bunch of software running on this, and how it looks and how it works. And then that'll be about it for this thing. So thank you very much for watching. I hope this video was worth the wait, and really hope you enjoyed. And I will see you next time.